Warning, this video contains spoilers for Little Nightmares. The opinions expressed in this video are the official opinions of Cawthorne Communications Incorporated. However, these opinions are the subjective opinion of the work. Viewer discretion is advised.
Have you ever wanted to enjoy fine dining at the bottom of the sea? Then please consider the Maw next time you're wanting a night out. We have world-class cuisine at a fraction of the cost of most other dining experiences. In fact, when you're here,
you'll never want to leave.
Book your reservation today.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to all you first-time viewers, and to all you returning viewers, welcome back. I am Cawthorne, CEO of Cawthorne Communications Incorporated, and Twitch streamer at twitch.tv/Cawthorne_communications. And on this program, we review games that I managed to finish on stream. The subject of today's review is Little Nightmares, a cinematic platform game that's dark, terrifying, and far too short. Let's preface this real fast. Little Nightmares is a game with no dialogue nor text. The names of things, as well as the overall lore, is found outside the game itself in supplementary materials, such as comics, the game's achievements, and the game's store page. If I get anything wrong, be advised that my opinion has been formed by the main game and what little supplementary material I come across. Without any further ado, let's begin. Little Nightmares begins with you waking up as a small child, dressed as Georgie from It.
Hiya, Georgie.
You can learn from supplementary material that her name is Six, and she goes by she/her pronouns, as far as we know anyway. She is trying to escape from wherever she is. You don't really learn much about it until later, but based on the way the set subtly shifts, it's safe to assume you're at sea in some way or form, which might make escaping a little bit, difficult. You go through what looks to be some sort of prison. The only real enemies here are giant leeches, eyes that turn you to stone, and your own unfamiliarity with the controls. Meanwhile, you climb empty cages and walk by several doors that don't open. You reach the end of the level and Six begins to hunch over due to hunger. A child throws you some food and you go on your merry way to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 looks about the same as Chapter 1 at first, with cages abounding everywhere. Then, you start getting into areas that look more lived in, which is where you get caught by the janitor, a seemingly blind creature with very long arms. With all that, they should have called him the Handyman, whose vocalizations, when alerted, sounds vaguely like a gorilla. Did I mention that this is a very stealth-heavy game? Well, you know now. You spend most of this and all subsequent chapters hiding from monstrosities that would make Tim Burton sick with envy. You carefully escape and sneak around, trying and likely failing repeatedly to avoid the attention of the janitor, climbing bookshelves and at one point turning on a TV that keeps saying boo-bah. I am very disappointed in myself. You eventually get cornered by the janitor in a storage room. He tries to grab you using his long arms to reach out from under the partially closed door. You close them on his arms, cutting them off and presumably killing him. Either way, you escape the scene of homicide you just committed and head off to Chapter 3, the kitchen. In the kitchen, it looks just as a kitchen should, filled with fresh, tasty-looking ingredients somehow, in spite of both being at sea and how grimy the place looks. Here is when you encounter the chefs, who both seem to be wearing saggy, ill-fitting skin suits of poor quality, accompanied by the tune of what can only be described as aggressive tuba. If they catch you, they begin to put you on the nearest kitchen workstation, which implies that these kids are being imprisoned to be used as food for something, which of course means
Silent Breed is people!
After escaping the chefs via meat hook, Chapter 4 begins with you having a poignant moment with the gnomes. Ah yes, quick side note, The poignant moment with the gnome I just mentioned, yeah, that happens at the end of Chapter 4, not right at the beginning. Anyway, back to the review. Pointy-headed mushroom-looking creatures who've been helpful to you at every turn. Your hunger strikes again, and they offer you a sausage, and you decide that the mushroom creature would make a much better meal. So you eat the gnome. You...
Absolute monster.
But hang on a second. Let's think about this. The kitchen would probably get a D rating at best from a health inspector. So that gnome is probably the cleanest edible thing you've seen all chapter. And I guess you decide to enact the proper tradition of the sea. Also, either way, whether you eat the sausage or not, someone is getting eaten. Anyway, after you brutally murder a gnome to sate your hunger, you wind up in the guest area, where you find out what this terrible place is for. It's so that these rich people can come here and presumably feast upon the meat of children. And apparently, they prefer it raw, considering they will ignore the food in front of them to try and eat you if you cross their path, to the point where they'll stampede if enough of them notice you. After escaping the horde of monstrous elites, you wind up in the final chapter, known as the Ladies' Quarters. You encounter the lady, the presumed owner of this horrible place, who wears a mask and is dressed in a somewhat subdued version of traditional geisha dress. You expose her to a mirror and find that not only is she horrified by her own reflection, she's also physically harmed by it. After exposing her to her own reflection enough times, she's left lying on the floor. Suddenly, your hunger strikes again, and you walk up to her and brutally bite into her neck, killing her. The next scene shows you walking out of this place, having absorbed the lady's power Dovahkiin style. So you walk out, absorbing the souls of any guests who dare approach you as you walk. And that's where the game ends. Confused? So was I. So let's give you some context for how this all makes sense. This whole game takes place in the Maw, some sort of submersible resort for the wealthy of this world, and none who go in have ever returned. In some supplementary material, it's implied that the guests of the Maw are eventually killed and fed to the other guests. And that's all I've been able to glean about the story so far from not in the game. There are many mysteries in the world of Little Nightmares, and given the game's lack of dialogue, they will likely remain unanswered. But here's a few questions that I came up with. Why would anyone go to the Maw if it's well known that no one ever returns? My guess is that they have some sort of weird compulsion to, as if some sort of force was making them do it. Either that, or they're so consumed by their own hedonism that they don't care. Also, 6 absorbing the lady's power indicates that she, and by extension the Maw itself, survived by consuming the souls of the guests. Which of course also begs the question, when did this horrible cycle start? My best guess is that the Maw is part of some process that keeps this world functioning in some way. Which may imply that by killing the lady, we just threw a wrench into all that, so yay us! This world also seems to be full of either monstrosities or little children trying to survive said monstrosities. So, this begs the question, is it impossible to grow into adulthood in this world without becoming a monster? Given that 6 seems all but destined to replace the lady after this since she now seems to have her power? It seems like that is the case, but since we're not the developer nor the writer, we can't say for certain. Also, what is the rest of the world like? Is the whole world this grim, if not worse? Is this world mostly empty because it's all nightmarish horror? Judging by the fact that the Maw is just allowed to continue operation, I'm thinking so. So, I'm going to go over my thoughts about some of the non-story aspects of the game to start with the thoughts segment, because there's quite a bit to go over here. This game is designed so you are tiny and helpless, in a world clearly not built for you. Anyway, that feeling of helplessness is reflected in the visual design. Most of the game takes place in the minimally lit areas, with very little distinctly visible, and most objects are absolutely massive compared to you. In addition, most objects are made with sharp edges and corners, which is the Disney 101 design language for something being dangerous or evil. And then, there's also how everything is just a little bit lopsided if you really take a look. For example, this bed in the twin chef's room looks very uneven and kind of conveys a sort of surreality to the setting. And to me, personally, it kind of reminds me of those old stop-motion Christmas movies so near and dear to our hearts, and always just a tad creepy. And another interesting aspect taken into account is that not a lot of people consider the lighting. Most of the fully lit scenes are kind of yellowish and almost sickly looking, and the angle of the lighting makes the various aspects of the creatures of the maw, it makes them pop. Every little wrinkle and fold is visible and brought into stark contrast. So, overall, even in areas where you're not being actively pursued by an enemy, this game's visual design is meant to be vaguely unsettling and dreamlike, fitting the title. As with a lot of good horror games, opportunities to actually fight any encountered opponents are few and far between. The only enemies you can even hurt are the janitor and the lady. Most of this game is spent hiding from enemies, running away, and climbing over objects using the environment to solve puzzles. The only equipment you get is a dim lighter to barely illuminate dark areas. Again, this game is designed for you to feel helpless. It's nothing but you and your wits against a world that wants you dead. And so you run, grab, and climb in whatever way you can to escape what seems an inevitably grisly fate. The controls are also designed to be difficult. For example, you have to manually grab onto ledges, so if you jump from one ledge to another, you better hope your timing's right. Same thing with throwing. There's very few instances where you can blame a death on just simply bad luck. Anyway, that's kind of most of my thoughts about the non-story aspects of the game. So, let's go over some of the things that I think about the story. So, the story of Little Nightmares is about a small, innocent child trying to survive and escape a horrible situation. In the process of escaping, she kills 3 other beings. One is in self-defense, the other to sate a need when an alternative was offered, and then finally finishing off the lady by brutally biting her in the jugular. The biggest question that comes to mind is whether or not Six's actions are justified. Well, there isn't really any clear-cut answer. When Six severs the arms of the janitor, it's a clear-cut action of self-defense, because it's not like the janitor was just going to give up trying to capture Six. When Six eats the gnome, it seems as though she's choosing to eat the gnome rather than the proffered sausage. But let's examine this for a second. Is Six really in control here? Given the explicitly supernatural things aboard the maw, such as the lady, and the maw itself being considered to be alive to some extent, in supplementary material anyway, and the fact that Six's hunger seems to be getting a bit more horrific each time it crops up, I think it's safe to say that this isn't a typical I could eat a horse sort of hunger. This is the sort of hunger that is usually caused by people being possessed by Wendigo spirits in folklore. This hunger eventually culminates in Six brutally biting into the neck of the lady, and it's pretty graphic in spite of there being no blood. So, while I can't say for certain whether or not Six was in control of herself, I'd say there's a case to be made that she may not have been. So, I'm not sure if anyone could consider the situation to be a slow descent into evil. even though it could certainly be interpreted that way. However, 6 gaining the power of the lady and the overall feel of the closing sequence kind of hints that 6 is destined to replace the lady. But that's not certain, and we can't really say what she'll do with these powers once she escapes. For all we know, she's just taking her revenge against the guests who tried to eat her not even an hour ago. And, since none of the games released so far have taken place after this one, we can't know for sure, and I think the devs want us to draw our own conclusions here. So, with that, we leave the story thoughts with a question. Is this a story about a child eventually becoming the very monster she was trying to escape from? Or is it the story about how far a child was willing to go to escape certain doom? And there's no correct answer. For now, anyway. As with the previous review, we're going to score aspects of the game and average them out with a score. But I'm just going to start by saying that Little Nightmares was a wonderful experience, regardless of how it scores numerically. Also, a quick reminder that this review does not include the DLC, so do keep that in mind when judging my numbers. It's only based off of what I experienced. We'll start with the gameplay, and I had no issues with the gameplay. I think there were only 1 or 2 times the entire game that I ever got stuck. The puzzles are fairly intuitive, but they can still be hard to do just because of the way the controls are. Can it be frustrating at times? Yes. But since the game is about a frail-looking child going up against all odds, it's supposed to be hard. So I'll give it a 5 out of 5 because they kind of nailed what they were going for. As for story gets a 4 out of 5 because it takes a lot to tell a good story like this in a game, especially without dialogue, because you cannot rely on verbal exposition. Show don't tell is all you have. Little Nightmares succeeds in this. It's only not a 5 because, as a person who loves reading piles and piles of lore, I want to know more about the overall setting. And yes, I agree it's a nitpicky reason, but, well, it's my reason nonetheless. As far as replayability goes, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, because this game is short, but there's secrets littered all around it, which I didn't go for during my playthrough of the game. I want to play through the DLC, and I want to go back and find all the stuff I missed the first go-around. As far as length goes, since I'm not counting the DLC, I'm gonna rate it a 3.5 out of 5. And here's the thing, while the game is shorter than I would have preferred, the story also didn't feel rushed. Each chapter of the game had the perfect length that it needed to in order to tell its segment of the story. If anything, all Little Nightmare is guilty of here is leaving me wanting more, which is exactly what a good game should do. While the game does get its point across, I just want a little bit more. I want longer. As far as the total score goes, according to my accounting department, Little Nightmares averages out to a 4.25 out of 5. Overall, the game is excellent. It was only really brought down by the length score, and that's just because I personally would have preferred the game to be just a bit longer. Had I played the DLC, I probably would have rated it even higher. This is a game I think most people who like dark themes, strong narrative, and maybe just a bit of surreality can enjoy. Almost like the nightmares for which the game is titled. That's all I have for you this evening. If you want to watch me actually play these games, please watch me at twitch.tv/Corvid Communications on Tuesdays and Fridays at 6 to 8 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time.
The next game Mr. Cawthorne will be reviewing is Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion. The review after that is to be determined. Corvid Communications Incorporated appreciates your viewership. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.